Namaskar. In this episode of Dil Se, we're going to talk about the land of high passes, the Little Tibet, what's called Ladakh, a land of 59,000 square kilometers, and a land which has been ruled over the centuries. You had the Namgyals, which ruled between the 9th and the 19th centuries. The Namgyals fostered a syncretic culture between the Shias and the Buddhists. After that, the Dogras conquered it in 1834. And at the time of partition in 1947, Ladakh and Kargil were integrated, so to say, with Jammu and Kashmir. And they didn't like that, because that brought about the Kashmirization of this area. The Ladakhis felt that the kind of investment, the kind of economic development that was required to take place didn't take place. They didn't get enough allocation of resources. They were unhappy about that. And they wanted, in fact, publicly, and they stated so publicly, that they want to integrate with India. They don't want to be with Jammu and Kashmir. And naturally, it was difficult at that point in time because that was one state. And then, of course, came the abrogation of 370. But before the abrogation of 370, they wanted autonomy. They wanted to be a union territory within the Union of India, apart from, and not be part of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And they were very happy when 370 was abrogated, exceptionally happy, and they thought, well, now is the time when our demands will be met. And what were their demands? Very, very small demands. They wanted that the fragile area of Ladakh should not be disturbed. They wanted development to take place there. They wanted their culture, and most of 46% of Ladakh is Buddhist. 40% of Kargil is Shia. They was hoping that the government of India would give them statehood. They were hoping that they would get 2 members of parliament representing Ladakh. They were hoping at least they would get the status of 6th schedule, even if the statehood is not given to them. They were hoping for a public service commission. And this whole process of these demands started from 2020. At one time, Sonam Wangchuk did a 1,200-kilometer walk, reached Delhi, but at the borders he was detained. So this protest has been going on. And then came recently his being incarcerated under the Preventive Detention Act. Now, we're not going to talk about the merits of the case, but here we're going to talk about how the Ladakhis are a buffer in a very sensitive border state, how they are great nationalists, and they've always been, how they wanted, in fact, they led anti-Chinese protests after Galwan happened. So we're going to talk about Ladakh, its history, what's happening there, why are people unhappy, and what should be done, and what are the concerns of the Ladakhis. And we've got 3 extraordinary people to talk about that. I want to introduce Gitanjali Angmo. She is the founder and the CEO of the Himalayan Institute of Alternatives in Ladakh. She is an entrepreneur, an educator, a spiritual seeker, known for transforming education and community development in Ladakh. And she is the Chevening Fellow from the University of Oxford with a PhD. And you blend, Gitanjali, your corporate background, which you founded several ventures, and you're into education in a big way. You set up a Cambridge-affiliated school in Chennai, advised the Maharashtra International Education Board with a passion. You have a passion for Aurobindo's philosophy. You have a passion for Vedanta, for the Upanishads. And ever since you founded this Himalayan Institute of Alternatives in Ladakh. You have a 5-pillar framework, emphasis on contextual curricula because you're into education, hands-on learning, transdisciplinary problem solving, emotional intelligence, and spiritual self-recovery. You're also a speaker in global forums, and at the moment you'd be fighting a personal battle because Sonam is detained under the NSA, and we hope and pray that you win that battle eventually. But thank you very much for being here to talk about Ladakh. I want to also introduce my friend Sadiq Wahid. Sadiq, you know, I can't imagine anybody who is an expert in Central Eurasian studies, focusing on the cultural and political dynamics of Tibetan, Mongolian, and Manchu complexes, alongside Himalaya and South Asian geopolitics. A PhD in the Inner Asian and Altiec studies from Harvard, MEd from Harvard, and you did your basic degree in philosophy in Minnesota. Yes. And you currently are a distinguished professor in the Shivnada University, where you lecture in Central Eurasian cultural complexes. You are adjunct fellow in the Institute of Chinese Studies, associated with Tibet Policy Institute, and the founding vice chancellor of the Islamic University of Science and Technology in Kashmir. You have great interest because you're a Ladakhi yourself, so obviously you have great interest in what's happening in Ladakh. So thank you very much for being here. Radha, an old friend of mine, you were the interlocutor, I remember, Dr. Manmohan Singh's government. You went to Kashmir. You were, you believe in conflict resolution. You're a peacemaker. You want to build peace amongst communities, and you emphasize women's role in conflict resolution. And you built a career spanning decades in policy academia and international organizations focusing on South Asian security and human rights, with advanced degrees in history and social sciences. You've also played a significant role. You were formerly the director of the Nelson Mandela Center for Peace and Conflict Resolution in Jamia. And you've been the Director General of the Delhi Policy Group. And you set up that independent think tank on international security and foreign policy. And also you have filed a report called A New Compact with Jammu and Kashmir in 2011. And you're also deeply, I believe recently you went to Ladakh, so you will tell us hands-on experience of what happened there. But let me start with you, Gitanjali. What do you think is happening in Ladakh, and why this unrest?
It is not unrest from Ladakh's point of view. Okay. It is just a reminder to the government to honor their promise.
What were their promises?
Based on which they won the last two elections, both the MP and the Hill Council elections, to grant legislature to Ladakh, be it as UT with legislature or statehood, and to grant it as the 6th schedule status, because 95% of the population is tribal in Ladakh.
Okay.
So when 370 was abrogated and Ladakh became a UT, as you said, everybody was happy. But when they read the fine print, it became evident that it was a UT without a legislature and without 6th schedule. So it is like opening it up for the wolves, because the...
Why do you say wolves?
Because when the fragile ecosystem like that is not protected, then the people who come from outside, they say in Ladakh, it's only the best of friends and the best of enemies that come.
Oh, I see.
Because it's such a difficult place. And it would also attract all kinds of wrong people who would want to make use of the resources. There is, we know, rare earth in the Tibetan plateau.
There's a lot of lignite there, I believe.
Yes, which is the future of AI and computing. And also the gigawatts of power that government wants to set up, for which they need thousands of acres of land. But this movement is not anti-development. 6th schedule is not anti-development. Generally, development is equal to destruction, as we have seen, be it in the northeast or
the nature of development that's happening around.
Yeah, generally,
what the environment.
Yes. So what people of Ladakh want, and Sonam is their voice and their representative, is that this development should happen in a conscious manner. It should not, because a politician will look at it for his 5-term benefit, 5-year term. A businessman will look at it for his ROI.
Yes.
But it's the people there.
ROI means return on investment.
Return on investment. And then, but it's the people who have lived there for thousands of years and who are looking at generations to come. Because there are very beautiful community practices in Ladakh, like the Paspon, it is called, where there are families that stay together for generations, and they come together for the deaths or marriages. Then there is this Churpon, which the water is managed by the villagers themselves.
I see.
And the resources are not looked at to be exploited, but nature is looked upon as a mother. So you only take as much as you need. So what 6th schedule basically says and insists is that when policies are made, these practices have to be taken into consideration. And Sonam has been pioneering this through his initiative of SECMOL, and now both of us through this HIAL, Himalayan Institute of Alternatives, which is not a university which just gives you a certificate so that you go to Dubai or UK and get a job. Okay, we say that the success is if our students go back to their villages and make it smart and prosperous, because this is the Sri Aurobindo's way of development, which is, he had said that if India follows the European way of just urbanization, then we'll only be realizing 50 years later, as Europe has realized, that that is not the way. We have to have grassroots, local self-sufficiency.
And the Dakis all believe in that.
Yes, the local self-sufficiency. So, I give this example that what do you call abundant or rich, If you go to a village in Zanskar, which is the backside of beyond. If Ladakh is the backside of beyond of India, Zanskar is the backside of beyond of Ladakh.
Oh, I see.
If all 4 of us land up there and go to a house, they'll welcome us. Okay, they'll have blankets for us. They'll have place for us to sleep. They will not even ask you, when do you plan to leave? We can plan to be there for a week or 10 days. Because it is local self-sufficiency. They are growing their own barley, they are growing their own potatoes for the whole year. It is subsistence agriculture. They are making their own clothes. They make their own houses with the bricks that they make with their own hands.
I see.
So they are
It's entirely
recession-proof.
sustainable.
Sustainable, financially even. They are recession-proof, Whereas if you see UK, it is reeling under energy poverty today because of the Ukraine-Russia war.
Correct.
Whereas here you can have your own solar panels and...
So that's changing. That's changing. Since 2020, is that changing?
No, I'll come to that. But so this model of local self-sufficiency is what is taught and lived in HIAL. So Sonam is not saying that don't set up gigawatts of power. In fact, ever since we came to know that government is planning for this, we did a prototype of 40 kilowatt of agri-photovoltaics, where we researched what is the level of transparency that would be needed and how much of fodder can be grown, because rather than displacing the herders, you help them, because every winter they lose their Pashmina goats because it's covered with snow and they have no fodder to eat. So he is saying that we can co-opt the communities and do a development in a way which does not displace them or cause them harm, but help them. And the government liked this agri-photovoltaic prototype that we did, and so that's what HIAL does, that whatever is the issue of the community, the students take it up as action research projects, and then we submit that to the government, so that to help them in policy. The Skarchutan region, they are now scaling up this prototype. So that is the development Sonam is talking about, and it is not to allow army to build roads, etc. We know state subjects, central subjects, the lists which are there. So Hayal is an experiment where the university looks at the issues of the communities and engages the youth to solve the problems through innovation and then scale it up into enterprises. And
I understand that. I'm just saying why then is there so much concern as that this, despite this development model, what is happening in Ladakh, that is a matter of great concern to the Ladakhis.
So this sixth schedule not being granted is the big problem.
No, but that's a political thing. But are there any lands which are being taken over by private players? Are there hotels being built, changing the demography of the area? Is that happening?
Yes, it is not happening overtly, but there is information that a lot of people from outside are coming in. And why is it that the land policy has not been drafted? It's been 5 years since the UT came to power.
But that's Kwe Hayal, but I'm just saying generally.
I think that there are a few things. For example, the government plans hydropower, solar power, and transmission lines, which will demand the cutting of 157 hectares of forest land in Ladakh.
I see.
And, you know, in 2020, with the new rules that came up following the Reorganization Act, and Ladakhis saw what was happening in Jammu and Kashmir, where tourism, mining, and other rights were being given to people from outside the state and to companies from outside the state, plus the new domicile laws.
Now you can buy land.
That removed the protections that people had for land rights as well as other economic rights and citizenship rights. Those, when they went in Jammu and Kashmir, many people feared in Ladakh that might happen in Ladakh as well. And the fact is that you had a lieutenant governor's office and administration which was inaccessible and unaccountable. The powers of the hill councils were progressively eroded, taken over by the lieutenant governor's office. And so fears kept growing in Ladakh. When the hill council people could not work with the lieutenant governor's office, when they were not consulted, then these development plans come in which neither are the elected hill council members consulted, nor are the environmentalists of Ladakh consulted. The fear gets palpable. And then you look at the unemployment figures.
That's 28.6% of those who are graduated.
26.8%.
Oh, 26.8%.
But that jumped in a single year from 9.8 in 21 to 22 to 26.8 in 22 to 23. Yes. So, I mean, the suffering is quite acute.
And the tourism has increased 50%.
Correct.
There are 3 lakh tourists annually now. Yeah. So, what's going to happen to the demography? Tell me, you're from Ladakh. What are yours?
I will, agree with Radha in that the whole thing has happened very incrementally, and Ladakhis have grown wise to it incrementally. Because, it's not agitation for the sake of agitating, it is that. And I think that right now, what is the real issue is the last that we mentioned, which is the 26.8, say 27% unemployment.
Yes.
That's a large segment for a small population like that, yes. Number one. Number two, they're impatient. And I dare say that I think the priority number one right now is the youth and their trepidations about the future and what's going to happen. And I think the demands that you outlined in the beginning, the 4, major demands, it's been there, for at least for 4 years now that I can remember that this is that. And that was done not on the spur of the moment. I mean, Ladakhis went around to the northeast and went south to Pondicherry, researched it, came to a sort of decision about it, and talked about it. And the important thing I think to realize is that what has happened is that Ladakh has developed a culture of collective leadership. So you have the Leh, apex body, you have the KDA, both of them, and it's extraordinary how it happened. I mean, for an observer, because what they did is they got consensus intra-Kargil and intra-Leh.
Okay.
And then they met together and said, okay, can we arrive at a consensus? And I remember this moment because it was the 1st of August, 2021, that suddenly they came out of the hall, and I just happened to be in Leh. And somebody said, Leh and Kargil have united.
Yes, they did.
And I was like, what? I mean, how did that happen? And I think that that's a recognition of the dangers that they feel about their identity. About the fact that there are many things that go with this thing called Ladakh, and we want to preserve as much of it as possible. In the immediate, which has suddenly turned violent on the 24th of September, I think the vanguard of it was the youth, in the sense that their sense of impatience, and after negotiations for 4 years, nothing happens. Something's got to give at that point, and I think that that's what happened. So now we're at a state where there's a stalemate, and Ladakhis have walked out of a conversation that was taking place, and it is because they want an investigation into the violence as to how it took place, and because narratives can change overnight, So I think that the takeaways that I take away is this extraordinary collective leadership coalescing, number one. I think that Sonam Wangchuk represents in the sense, given his age and so forth, really the sentiments of the youth in many ways. He's in the leadership, he's amongst the younger, set. And so therefore there's a salience there for the importance of addressing the youth issues. I think that, the trick is not to let it escalate and not to let it go beyond. I'll tell you, I mean, this morning I read the Telegraph, and if I may, I just want to read quotes that sent chills down my spine. It said, the quotation is, and they're quoting somebody by the name of Rinchen Dadul, who died. I mean, not quoting him, sorry. This is a cousin of or a friend of Rinchen Dadul's, who's not named. He died, 20-year-old, in the shooting. He was one of the ones. And this friend, who's not named in the article, friend, relative, whatever, says, nobody is born a terrorist, but it is the situation that makes one a terrorist. If these things continue here, the peace of this place will vanish, and it will burn along with everything. Yeah. This is a Ladakhi speaking.
Yeah, but there'll be elements, there'll be elements.
Sure, I'm not.
But if you ask me, the history of the Ladakhis has been the most patriotic.
Absolutely.
To go back,
there is no doubt about it. The most peaceful.
And to go back to
you're saying that there'll be aberrations if this kind of thing happens. There'll be aberrations, but
Absolutely.
The fact is, by and large, the Ladakhis are perhaps the most patriotic.
Yeah, I'm a Ladakhi and I know Ladakh. I mean, but my point is that when you push a people,
that of course,
then this is what is to be avoided.
But what I would like to highlight, what he said, was that when the UT was formed, it was Hayal that identified, people from politics, policy, educators. We made a group of 10 to 12 people and arranged for them to visit the UT of Pondicherry, and you know,
that's what he mentioned.
and it was Hayal that did that exercise, and the findings of that, so that the government can see the pros and cons of all the other experiences that has happened, was submitted to the then MP, so that the going forward. So always Hayal has stood for whatever is happening on the ground,
Right.
to supply the government with research and data, you know, and action research, so that informed decisions can be taken. And this reflects, as you said, the history that Ladakhis always, you know, work with consensus, you know, with peace, with solidarity, because somebody, a living guru like Dalai Lama, visits every year, stays for 2 months, and his talks are attended both by Buddhists and the Muslim population of Ladakh. So that whatever he talks about compassion and all of that is kind of ingrained in people. Even when the CRPF was busy shooting, there are videos of youngsters who are giving water and helping the CRPF who was also injured or hurt. So that's the heart that we are talking about, you know, which forgives and which is full of compassion, because we teach these kids, you know, day in and day out. Both SECMOL, where there are 14, 15-year-olds, and Art Institute, where they are in their early 20s. So they are the representative of the youth there. And everything that happens there, you know, it is never violence that is resorted to by them.
I think that on the violence issue, first of all, there's a question of who were this small breakaway group that went and set fire to the BJP office. And by the way, I mean, violence seems to be rather a large term to use for setting fire to one office, certainly for those of us who come from Delhi, Punjab, Haryana, etc., or who have grown up with tire burning and house burning.
But
of
still,
course, it
and
is
the
a
crime
form,
rate.
but if I may finish, it is a form of property destruction.
Yes, yes. It is.
But that's what happened in one office. Does that justify a firing on a crowd and killing 4 people, one of whom actually is a retired Ladakhi scout, who are the front line of our security? I mean, my question, apart from the demand for a magisterial or judicial inquiry, is a slightly different one. Normally, when a member of the security forces is killed, you would have a show of solidarity from the security forces.
Right.
The funeral would have, you know, various salutes of respect and so on. We have not heard or seen of this happening with this gentleman. The army in Ladakh has traditionally relied on public support.
Yes.
More than that, what we have seen is that every invasion that has come by way of either Kargil 1999 or the Chinese incursions, the warnings have never come from our intelligence, whether military or they have always come from local shepherds.
That's correct.
Now, the Ladakh Scouts was set up after a long battle of Ladakhis, saying, please, let us be the front line. Now, what are you doing? This relationship, this consensus, how much have you harmed it? And then you have the director of police making these really shocking accusations, saying, you know, they wanted to incite and burn the whole of the country, the nation, that this, that. I mean, you know, this is not the rhetoric or the language that you want a director of police or a commissioner of Ladakh to use at all, because what does it tell you? It not only tells you that they have absolutely no understanding of the ground reality, but they are willing to be extreme beyond belief. I mean, these are very extremist statements that they have made.
Look at what the government of India's position is. They say that after August 5, 2019, we have invested 40,000 crores in Ladakh. right, for
Sorry,
economic
40,000?
crores like that, for economic development. That's their case, that as far as they are concerned, the kind of investments, the kind of allocations that have been made to Ladakh are much greater than they were ever.
So what I was told is every year 5,000 or 4,000 is allotted, and of it half goes back unutilized.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's I'm telling you that over the years they say about 40,000 crores has been given, and that roads have been built and this, that, and the other, and greater facilities. But the fact of the matter is that one time, 90% of Ladakhi students failed in their class boards. Today, 97% of Ladakh is literate,
Yes.
but 60% of the schools are understaffed.
Yeah.
Right? So even though Hayal is doing great work, but the fact is that on the ground, you don't have enough faculty, you don't have enough schools, and you don't have enough employment, right? And if you have people from outside coming into Ladakh, buying the land, right, where the Ladakhis' demand was that all employment should be based on domicile, namely that we should, 80% should be from Ladakh itself. That has changed because that policy is not there at all. It was 30% odd, but that's also changed. So if you're going to change the demography of a sensitive area, which is on the border, you're going to have problems. And so how do you deal with that? I mean, what should the government of India do to actually resolve these issues? Because you are on a border area where the line of actual control is abutting this area, both in China and Pakistan line of control. So you can't afford to have any kind of unrest.
I totally agree, and I would say that begin first with releasing Mr. Wangchuk,
And
do
just
the
to
magisterial
answer your
judicial
earlier
inquiry.
question.
I'll give you,
Yeah.
I'll shut up in a minute. And then you've had 9 rounds of talks with the Kargil Democratic Alliance and the Ladakh Apex body. Now, you have to resolve this. There is absolutely no real argument against giving 6th schedule. It should be patently obvious that this is something that should be done. Statehood, I believe, is more complex, and we can come to that if you like later, because I believe that is connected to the Reorganization Act.
Yeah, so
and what you it has to be connected
there's
to
some
that
immediate
because you
gains to
either
be made,
repeal
immediate
it or
gains,
you
and then later.
amend, you know, so that's an issue I would say is something that should be done together with Jammu and Kashmir. And I would really urge that the leaderships of Jammu and Kashmir and of the KDA and LAB start talking to each other on this, because a joint stand would be really difficult for anyone to resist.
You were saying something, Tanzania.
No, I was going back to DSP's statement of blaming it on Sonam, when there is a video of Sonam condemning this violence, and in that video you can hear gunshots, you know, and he says that my peaceful measures have failed.
He broke the fast.
And I break the fast because if this is leading to this violence, then I break the fast. And so, and then to, you know, blame it on him. It is, the whole country, I think, knows that it is not the truth, and that he always, you know, followed this peaceful path. But yeah.
Well, with peaceful people following peaceful paths, there should be no room for violence at all. And it's unfortunate that it happened. But anyway, the other aspect that I'm concerned about is that 3% of global glaciers are in Ladakh. 3% of global glaciers. And 20 to 30% ice loss is going to take place by 2050. There have been flash floods in 2023. 20 people were killed. Water scarcity affects 80% of the villages. And this mining activity is going to result in pollution, and ecotourism is not going to help. So I think this is a pristine area that needs to be preserved. So what are your thoughts on that?
So we've been working on glaciers, you know, building artificial glaciers, but also working on GLOFs, the glacial lake outburst. And when glaciers recede and climate change happens, it is predicted that there would be more rains. This year saw to a region which used to have, you know, about 100 mm of rains per year. There was 100 mm of rain per day this time.
Oh, I see.
So that's another research that Sonam was leading at Hayal, that how do you retain water when glaciers recede and there's more rainfall. So through these artificial glaciers, we've been afforestating the valleys.
I see.
Through a lot of ram pumps and other techniques. So that right now the flash floods, as you said, happen because there are no trees.
Yes.
You know, so as soon as there is a cloudburst or rain, it results in flood. And the flip side of flood is drought.
Right.
So that's the cycle. But the way we can address it is by planting trees in the valleys, so that when cloudbursts happen or when glaciers melt or any water that is there, it is not runoff water that results, but it gets absorbed and improves the groundwater. So that's an experiment that we've been doing across 23 villages and across these valleys. And this is another thing, as I said, to help the government to scale up. Because if we've done it in 23 valleys and we give them the data and each valley has its own...
So you're a community builder, you people are community builders.
Yes.
And the peace of that community has been destroyed by this one incident. And this is going to create more problems in the area.
Definitely.
And being a sensitive area is going to have long-term repercussions even on our security. What do you say?
Definitely so. I mean, I think, you know, my sort of approach to this is, you know, for example, climate. You know, I don't really speak very much on climate because I feel it's such a massive topic, you know. And since the violence started, my concentration has been on, you know, what is going to be the response to it, and how are we going to address the issues that are very difficult politically, you know, because one of the things that I think we have to recognize is that sometimes, you know, the Tibetan-speaking community across the Himalaya and so forth, you know, suffer, and I use that word advisedly, from what I call the prisoners of Shangri-La effect. You know, oh, they're very peaceful, they're very, you know, it's a very nostalgic, romanticized image of it, when in fact they are full on into the 21st century. And we need to see them as that. The reason I read out the quote is not to paint that there is a will to violence.
I understand that.
Not at all. You know, what it is that there is a statement. There was another video that was playing also, which I, you know, saw when I was looking through the thing, where the hurt that a person was talking about, a young man, you know, in his mid-20s at the most, you know, was saying, being called a traitor. You know, he said, how dare they call us a traitor?
Yeah.
You know, because, so, and then he was the one who says that even if it's the BJP office, I condemn the violence of going and burning it.
Right.
You know, so sentiments are there. I think we have to wake up to see the society for what it is. Ladakhis are not without problems. You know, I mean, internally.
Nobody in this country is without
Absolutely.
problems.
You know, internally. I mean, amongst ourselves, you know, and so forth. So I think that the thing to do is, my worry is that in the politics that we live in, fault lines are very easy to exploit and have been exploited. One of the things that I'm very proud about is how the unity between Kargil and Leh has held through, you know, because like I said, 1st of August, 2021, and up to now, I don't know how many times I've heard about an attempt to break it, you know, to break this unity. They failed. In fact, they solved the problem by, again, collective leadership meeting regarding a Buddhist temple that was going to be built in Kargil town since 1969.
I see.
They got together after the unity and resolved the problem. They said, here's the thing for the temple. We suggest that since it's in Kargil town and there are no Buddhists in Kargil town, why don't you turn it into a guest house?
I see.
For Ladakhis who are going through, who can stay there, Buddhist, Muslim, I don't think that there was a distinction there, and gave them some other land in order to build a monastery if they wanted, as big as possible. And, this happened literally a year and a half ago or something like that. They just had a chat. What's possible is what I'm saying. And what I'm fearing is the loss of this kind of politics that is rooted in Ladakh already, and to resolve problems, rather than the kind where we interface with each other on violent terms. I mean, government and Ladakh.
Let me ask you a difficult question.
Sure.
Which is that when 5th of August 370 was abrogated, I think a statement was made by the Chinese.
Yeah.
Right? What impact did that have? Do you think the build-up on the other side of Ladakh, because this
as a direct result of it.
Why do you say that?
I say that because,
what was the statement? Do you remember?
The statement was on the 5th of August. This happened on the 6th of August, and I don't remember whether it was Beijing or the embassy here made a statement and said, now we are directly involved in the Jammu and Kashmir dispute.
Why do you think they said that?
I'm sorry?
Why do you think they said that?
Well, because what it had is the effect of joining the LAC and the LOC together. And we know for the last 12 years, at least, if not 15, that China and, Beijing and Islamabad have been cozying up very closely. So much so, that...
So therefore, much greater necessity now to have peace and tranquility.
Absolutely.
And have the people on our side. That's
very
the
much.
point. That's the point.
But not that I see Ladakhis, suddenly flipping. It's not going to happen. But the point is, like I was saying a little bit earlier, using confusion to control is not a good idea. It's not a good idea. And I think that, I think the present dispensation of the, BJP-led government has tended to do that, and because I was feeling very confused for a few days after 24th of September, because I didn't know what had happened, and you'd really feel stupid, because I'd just been to Ladakh. I saw sort of a sudden build-up of troops there happening, so I said, am I imagining or is it real? And Ladakhis who were in Ladakh, resident, said, no, it's been building up for the last month. So I said, so why? And they had no idea.
Anyway, let me talk about corruption. Is there any corruption in Ladakh? Can you tell me if there is any corruption?
Yeah, so this whole UT that has come in, and why a greater need for 6th schedule and legislature is because, like for instance, I've been in Ladakh now for more than 8 years. And it's only now that the intricacies of, as I said, the community practices and all, I'm beginning to understand. But in the last 5 years, this is the 3rd governor, in 5 years. So there's a governor on an average for a year and a half. And with no understanding of Ladakh, and the commissioners also who come from outside have no understanding of Ladakh. They set up sewerage treatment plants, or they do, these kinds of decisions, which they just copy pasting from the plains, without any sensitivity to a trans-Himalayan high altitude cold desert, which is, ranges between -30 and +30. So they are just using their past knowledge and translating it there without adapting that knowledge. So that's one problem. And the second is that Ladakh did not know of any crime or violence.
I see.
We left our houses open.
It knew of corruption?
No, I'm coming to corruption as well. So the first is understanding of Ladakh and the policies that you are making, out of your hats. The second is we used to leave our houses open all the time. Even in the market, you just don't lock your car. There is almost zero crime rate. And then now we see gradually that also increasing. And third, I am told, is that some 5 or 8 years ago, corruption was unknown to Ladakhis leaders, like was crime. But we know of instances, and I would not like to name the officials, that the commissioners and all who were placed, there are instances of huge corruption of practices that they followed, because of which they've been being transferred out as quick as they come in. So many commissioners, so many governors in the last 5 years. And that's not what a place like that, which has become a UT for, after having fought for 75 years, deserves, where there's no understanding of policy, no understanding of the local practices, and you're bringing in wrong practices like corruption to an otherwise, populace who was not even aware of such practices.
Do you have any, you've heard of any of this, Radha?
Yeah, the corruption.
Corruption and other things on these issues?
I mean, corruption, I've heard a few things about officers coming
And
from
crime and stuff
outside
like
and
that?
being
Yeah.
involved in
Yeah, I'm
corruption.
talking of officers from outside
Yes.
who bring in corruption. And
So
the
that
practices.
I've heard of.
But that's when economic
And,
activity starts and hotels are being built and this is bound to
Money
happen.
is coming in.
Exactly. And some levels of domestic crime rising I've heard of, but I don't know the facts and figures. But if I may shift the conversation
Yeah.
slightly,
Sure.
because the wonderful unity between Kargil and Leh,
Right.
which as Siddiq has pointed out is something relatively new. And I would say it might stem from the fact that it was amicably agreed to create 2 hill councils out of the first, the original was Ladakh Hill Council in 95.
Right.
2003, because of the size of Ladakh and the cultural differences as well as political differences. The one council was not able to work.
Right.
And but they agreed together to create these 2 councils, and then I think that laid the ground for better relationships to develop
Well,
between.
Actually, just a slight correction,
You would-
and that is that it was always meant to be 2 councils, Hill Council for Leh and Hill Council for Kargil districts. What happened is that Kargil was, let me say, skeptical about it and held back and didn't take ownership of the Hill Council. And then later on, they were convinced, I think largely by Leh's experience, that this is something that they had to do. It wasn't the 2 agreeing to it. There were always meant to be 2 Hill Councils for the 2 regions.
I don't think so. Under the 95 Act, it was 1.
Okay.
It was
No,
a
there was
lo-
only 1, and that was because of Leh accepted it immediately. I mean, because Leh had agitated for it, whereas Kargil said, thanks, but no thanks, we'll think about it, and went from there. I mean, so the relationship between them has always been ambivalent.
The idea
But to
is...
get back
yeah.
to, anyway, the point I wanted to make, which was on the 4 demands of the 2 KDA and LAB
Yeah.
together, which have been part of the 9 rounds of talks with the
Right.
Home Minister, include statehood.
That's correct. But that's
And-
not going to happen immediately.
Well, whether it happens or not, I would like to say that, first of all, the size of this territory and the fact that it is a border state with 2 inimical neighbors
right,
of ours, not just 1.
Right.
And then its ecological, environmental, and other requirements entirely justify statehood, in my opinion. And in fact, I would argue strongly that if we look at the experience of the northeastern states, self-governance, creation of states, and giving of statehood has helped create peace and stability in several, not all, but in some. Come on, Mizoram and Nagaland.
I know, but you will see
compared
what's
to
happening in
20
Nagaland also today. But anyway,
But that has been, so even Nagaland has gotten alarmed by the removal of 370, because the second, 370 was the first peace agreement that became part of the constitution. 371, Nagaland was the second peace agreement,
That's
and then Mizoram got, and a couple of others, and so on.
And if you compare
And I
Sikkim, Sikkim has a population, let's say Ladakh has a population of 4 lakhs, they say, which is very small for statehood. But Sikkim has a population of 6 lakhs.
That's right.
But area-wise, it is just 4,000 square kilometers. This is 47,000
But
square kilometers.
that's the argument, you know, this is an all-India argument. To what extent is population criteria the dominant? Must it always be? In the Ladakh case, I would say this is an exception because of the size of the territory.
Yes.
So here I would argue population criteria is less important because simply looking at size and borders. However, having said that, I would once again say that Ladakh statehood can only go hand in hand with the restoration of Jammu and Kashmir's statehood. Because if you do the one without the other, the trouble you are going to create in Jammu and Kashmir is something every responsible, and you know very well that the Ladakh and Kargil people are amongst the most responsible people in our country. And I would say every responsible person has to think about that. That if you give Ladakh statehood without restoring Jammu and Kashmir statehood, the trouble and anger and risk of violence.
On that logic, I can tell you neither J&K nor Ladakh is going to get statehood.
Well,
There's no doubt about that.
And so
I always
hearing
believe you can never say never.
No, of course you can never
But sir,
say.
I will go back to your earlier question when Sonam was being threatened that he will have ED come after him.
Yeah.
So he had told that I welcome the ED because I have nothing to fight.
Right.
But I would also like ED inquiry to happen to all the past commissioners and to the UT government. And he had challenged that openly in his video. Because when he was during Galwan war, he was talking about boycott China. You know, bullet ka jawab, wallet se.
Yeah.
We came to know during
No,
that
huge protests against China took place in Ladakh.
No, but when we were talking about boycott Chinese goods, and in our university we have a policy not to buy Chinese goods, we heard that the UT of Ladakh had bought Chinese tablets under the first
But that's
LG
because they want quick communication.
That was there. No, but why? We know that China can put in chips, it could be a security hazard, and on one hand you're fighting Galwan, on the other hand you cannot make them economically better off by doing deals with them. So who's an anti-national here, you know?
Or let's say who's hypocritical at least.
When Sonam is saying don't.
But anyway, the point is that this is a very complex situation.
It is.
It needs to be handled very sensitively. Force is never an answer. Communication, reaching out, talking, being sensitive to the concerns, especially of an area which is bordering foreign powers. And I think it's time for the government of India to realize that they can't be dealing with troubles that are brewing up around the country.
I mean, this seems to me to be absolutely thoughtless creation of trouble.
Unnecessary.
They've created trouble where there wasn't
And
trouble.
so Sonam and we have always been issue-based, apolitical.
Yes.
He has praised Mr. Modi right in Islamabad from the stage about his mission life, which was a lifestyle change for environment, and his Swachh Bharat or whatever. He's praised it. But if he is asking you to remember your promise, or if he is telling you that this is a sensitive area, and if you do not do this, you will lose the elections, then you should treat him as a friend. Your best friend is not somebody who's your yes man, but somebody who's your critic.
I think the government of India has realized that in foreign policy there are no friends, right? In foreign policy there are no friends.
Well,
and in politics there are no promises.
That's a great line to end on, I
Thank
have
you
to
very
say.
much for being here. Really, it's very kind of you, for all of you to be here. Thanks a lot. Thank you.